Okay, we have another episode of the Labor Knots podcast, and I'm actually really excited. Tony, I didn't think that this would be the reason that we would get you on the Labor Knots podcast. We've been friends for a long time in the labor movement. We're being joined, very lucky to be joined by Tony Rebelo from CUPE 7000. It's the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 7000. I don't know if you noticed, for people on YouTube, I'm wearing my favorite CUPE shirt right now.
Nice.
I thought I would represent. I'm such a nerd. Anyways, Tony, you're here. Like I said, so we've been friends for a long time in the labor movement. We've known each other for a while. I've wanted to get you on before to talk about the type of work that your members do. But I think now more than ever, talking about the work that they do and talking about the work that they're doing right now in today's context, I think people would love to hear about. And I think it's very important that we get this message out there. So why don't we start by can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Tony, and about the type of work that CUPE 7000 members do?
For sure. Well, myself, I'm the president right now of the local, going on the second term. Been employed. So CUPE 7000 takes care of two properties or two employers. One is Southern Rail workers and the other is SkyTrain workers. So I'm employed by SkyTrain and I've been here for, I'm going on my 19th year now. And, so on the Southern Rail workers is a short line railway. We deliver a bunch of different goods for different customers. It could be cars, a lot of auto racks. We do a lot of feed out in the valley as well for Southern Rail. And SkyTrain, well, anyone who lives in the Lower Mainland knows what SkyTrain does and what we do here for SkyTrain. So we represent all the workers at SkyTrain, from admin staff to our SkyTrain attendants, our control operators, all our maintenance staff, and our instructors. So, we provide a service, and all our members, right from admin staff all the way out to our frontline workers, SkyTrain attendants, take great pride in their job and continue to do so every day.
Yeah, it's actually, so I don't want folks to think that I do absolutely no research when it comes to these podcasts,
Yeah.
But I did actually take a couple minutes to go to your website, and there's actually a couple of great videos about kind of the work that your members do.
Yeah.
And I think, so here's the thing, right? Like right now, so thinking about Translink, SkyTrain right now, I know right now, first thing that people are going to think is about the service cuts, about the layoffs, about COVID, about what life must be like on Translink, like while people are actually on SkyTrains. And so I know we talked a little bit before we actually hit record. Can you tell us a little bit, can you explain what it's like day to day right now for somebody that's working as a CUPE 7000 member in SkyTrains?
At SkyTrain right now, the day-to-day is definitely changed during the times through COVID. As you're aware, we've just dealt with 80 people that got laid off throughout our organization. And I'm going to focus a little bit on our SkyTrain attendants right now. They're still our frontline workers. They still ultimately need to do what they've done before COVID. They respond to emergencies. They respond to alarms on trains. They respond to train faults or a door problem. They still need to come out into the public eye and respond to all of that. And at the same time, now they're dealing with more and more frustrated passengers who are also essential service workers right now. We're the people that are traveling are people who need to get to hospitals and help the sick, and grocery store workers and gas station attendants and things like that. So yeah, our SkyTrain attendants right now are feeling a lot of pressure, and it's not an easy go for them. It never has been. Yes, we have less passengers, but we have a different type of passenger now, and these cuts haven't been easy for our workers, let alone as well as our passengers. With a 40% reduction that started last week in service, We've had, we have smaller trains, less trains. So the social distancing is no longer there.
Yeah, that's what.
Trains are full in the morning. It's like we have 380,000 people back on the system. I personally saw many pictures that was sent to me by different members that work out as SkyTrain attendants out in the field, and trains are full, and all the seats are taken. Some people are wearing masks, some people aren't. So it is some scary times. It's definitely a scary time.
This is sorry to cut you off, Tony.
No problem.
I know it's hard because I can't wave my hands at you like we would if we were in person. So this is the irony of this, right? So we all agree, we all know, obviously, less riders means less money coming into the system.
For sure.
But a move like this is taking a system that people are absolutely depending on to get them back and forth to work or back and forth to getting essential goods.
Yes.
Safely. Yeah. Safely is the main thing. But because of the service cuts that we're making, because there's less ridership, it's actually putting all those people back into risk, as well as the workforce is more at risk. And so I don't know what, and I don't know if any of us have this is the right thing to do, but I think we need to look beyond, just for myself, the way I feel about it is we need to look beyond kind of the dollars and cents about this and kind of start thinking about who's actually on these SkyTrain or who's on our transit system and how important it is, what our responsibility is to actually keep them safe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, and it now actually stems past the SkyTrain attendants where since COVID has come and become this great pandemic and we've been dealing with it on different levels, we've seen an increase of a lot of homeless people riding our system. And let's face it, a lot of those homeless people have mental health issues and they're self-medicating with drugs or whatever it may be. So now our maintenance staff are dealing with more, open needles and used syringes on trains. And so they haven't, they never really had to deal with that in the past, right? And our SkyTrain attendants are a little bit more reluctant to try and deal with some of these homeless people on the system because they just don't know where they've been, who they've been in contact with. And so it's making both jobs tougher for everyone, and everyone is at a very heightened alert. And our members want to continue to work with the public and help the public as much as they can, but it's definitely different times, and it's very scary times for our members.
Is there particular special type training that the attendants are kind of being given to deal with these changing times? Because it's like, you're right, and I don't even know what training you could give somebody because this is all so new, but how would they go about actually knowing how to work with or how to support people that are kind of flipping out?
Yeah, no, there really isn't any more training. All our SkyTrain attendants, they go through basic 6 to 8 weeks of Sky School, as we like to call it, for our SkyTrain attendants, and there's a little bit there on the mental health part, but I don't think there is enough. But there is a little, and the longer you work here, you get to be more aware of certain people who are that are dealing with an actual mental health issue, or they actually may be a medical issue. There's tons of times where in the past you would get a silent alarm or an intercom for a certain passenger, and they would say, oh my God, this person here on this train is drunk or high, but they're actually falling ill because they're going into diabetic shock or something like that. And so our members are trained to kind of see this and ask the questions, and they're just not people who check tickets or tell you how to get to a certain station or things like that. They're frontline workers. They're first responders to everything. they get calls, 911 hang up calls. There's people with weapons, or there's been a domestic abuse fight, or there's been, there's so many different things that our SkyTrain attendants deal with day in and day out. And, it's something that goes unrecognized quite a bit in the public eye. A lot of people think that they're just customer service people. Well, that's a part of their job, but there's so much more to their job as well. And the technical aspect, they have to know the trains in and out to make sure if we're having a glitch with the train, they need to learn, they need to know how to fix it, how to fix a door, how to drive a train. They're all train hostlers. They all know how to drive trains. If the train decides not to talk anymore with the computers up at the control center, it dies. It needs to be driven manually. So the role of the SkyTrain attendant is very important, and everyone, a lot of our passengers know it, and a lot of our passengers don't know it, and it's tough to get that message out. Right?
I think it's fair to assume that a lot of people don't, because like, I'm not going to lie to you. As you were talking, I was thinking about all the different scenarios that your members must face, and it is one of those things. I'm sure that a lot of people that are listening or watching are having those same thoughts. Like, yeah, of course. Like, it is these frontline workers, your members, that are out there kind of in these situations. And now with COVID, even more so, like, how do you deal with these situations? It's one of those things that I don't know if there is a black and white answer to how to deal with these times. But I do think, however, though, that service cuts leading to more trains that have potentially unsafe scenarios probably isn't the way to go. I don't pretend to be smart enough to figure out the right way to go. That's why I just co-host a podcast. But like, there must be a better thing to do. How much consultation goes on in these types of times with the unions, from the employer to the union?
We've had quite a bit of conversation with the employer, pretty much in daily talks with them regarding a lot of these things. But they came to us a couple of weeks back and said, we're losing money. We're losing $2.5 million a day. So, $75 million a month. And they needed to do some drastic cuts. And I understand if they didn't do it, they would be out of money by July, right? And then everyone would be out of work. And so I get it. I understand that. But was it the right solution? No. In my opinion, we're a critical service. We need to make sure our healthcare workers, our cleaning staff for the hospitals, all our frontline workers that take our system go to work and help those that are in need. And, the government, especially the federal government, they came out and said transit is one of the essential services for the purposes of COVID-19. So the federal government needs to put their money where their mouth is. They need to start funding us and put back the service. We don't need to go to servicing 370,000 people a day, but we could go back to a service level that we had just before we cut to 40% of our regular services, where we were able to make sure people had the ability to maintain physical distancing and wait an extra train so they could do that. But now people can't train. Trains during rush hour are full.
Yeah,
they tend to die off a little bit in the middle of the day and near the end of the night, because let's face it, there's not too many people going downtown right now and going to a bar or going to the restaurants, because there's really nothing open. And so we're transporting workers that need to get to work, and we want to make sure that, one, they get to work safely, and they're not, the chances now of them potentially getting COVID-19 on their way to work is a lot greater than it was 2.5 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's like, as you're talking, like, to me, it seems like there's a funding issue here, right? Like, where are the dollars coming from? And if transit is a essential service, a truly, like, a critically essential service, which I think most people would agree, then it should be funded as if it's a critically essential service.
Yeah, if you look at certain countries around the world during this pandemic, they're completely funding their transit systems, and they're going out and they're completely funding them. You know, I don't want to get into too much of my personal opinion on some of the things that this government has decided to fund through this pandemic, but
let's do it. What the hell?
Let's
we're not recording this.
Exactly. We're not recording, but let's just say transit should be on the top of the top 5 list, in my opinion. And they haven't said anything. John Horgan has come out from the provincial government and says transit is key. We're key now, and we're also key when we restart. People need to understand that we're key throughout this, and if the federal government doesn't think that we're not, then they're fooling themselves, and it's just going to be worse when we go to restart if they don't give us any funding soon.
I think you're bang on to something there. I think they might be underestimating how essential the transit system is as we start to get back to the new normal, because more people that might have been affected definitely financially during these times will probably be less able to commute in their own vehicles and more dependent on the transit system. Like, if they were already dependent on it before, they're for sure going to be now. And folks that were, barely able to afford fuel or insurance or car payments, whatever it is, if they fell into some financial hardship during these times, how are they going to get back on their feet? They're going to be using the transit system, right?
Exactly, right. There's there's a lot of people who aren't working right now and are making a lot less money than they were a month ago. And they may not be able to afford that car anymore and may need to take transit. And if we're still at a point where, sure, people are coming back to the system, but it'll take time to get everyone back. And depending on how many of these are members that have been given their layoff notice and not working, that all depends on, if they're gone for 3 months or 4 months or 6 months or whatever it may be. And, especially with the SkyTrain attendants, those attendants, when they come back, they need to brush back up on their skills and make sure they're ready to deal with the public again. And it's not easy. It's not easy being a frontline worker. And same thing with our mechanics, our admin staff, our control operators, all our maintenance staff. It's, everyone is readjusting, and they have to do, they're just, the work is a little bit different in certain areas, and they have to be more aware. Like, all our trains, when they're coming into the maintenance facilities now, they're being completely disinfected before we work on them. Everyone's being very aware so the trains will get disinfected, and then the workers will go on the trains and disinfect the work area again, right? So there's a lot more cleaning procedures in place, and trying to use the PPE, and that's another big issue is PPE. Everyone wants it, and there's only so much that everyone can have, right? So we're all kind of we're one of those organizations that's in the same boat where, trying to protect all our members. You have to be a little bit more, I guess, diligent with the PPE that you're using, and not wasteful. Right.
Yeah, well, when we were talking a little bit before, like, that's one of the things that I brought up is like the safety precautions that need to be in place as things open up to the new normal, whatever that looks like. I know the bus drivers are a different union, but same thing for bus drivers, right? Like, they're on the front lines as well, and like, how are they? But as we were talking about, that they're opening the front of bus fares June 1st.
Yes.
As that comes in. Now, I did read that the CEO of Translink is saying that they've got some state-of-the-art ways to protect their bus drivers. But I mean, I know what that kind of means, or I guess maybe I don't. I want to, I've heard employers make these types of comments before. I don't want to jump to conclusions. But
Well, and Carlos, I don't represent the bus drivers, but or or CUPE doesn't represent the bus drivers, but at the end of the day, by talking with some of the folks that I know that are bus drivers out there, and the transit supervisors that are CUPE local that do work for Coast Mountain Bus, I know they're putting in plexiglass shields or some sort of protective shields around the bus driver, but those are a lot of buses that they need to retrofit, and I don't know if they'll have them all ready by June 1st, especially where they're experiencing a bunch of layoffs as well. Right?
Yeah, that's the thing, and that's another thing, and probably almost for like a panel podcast. It's been interesting. I always knew there was a lot of unions connected to our transit system, but there really is a lot of unions.
There is a bunch of them.
There's a whole bunch of you, and so maybe that's a question that, like, so how often or do all the unions kind of consult with one another when these types of broad sweeping decisions are made by an employer?
Yeah, we have something called the JUC. It's the Joint Union Council, and we meet a few times a year or have conversations, and I keep an open dialogue with pretty much everyone, every other union that's under the Translink umbrella. So I try and give as much information that I can, and vice versa, see what's going on in their neck of the woods, right? And although we're all under the same umbrella called Translink, we also have our own separate employers. So everyone does a little bit, everything a little bit differently. Yeah, you're not going to want to know the comments I have on Translink, but how they've meddled into some of the employers and how they do some of our work. But we keep a pretty open dialogue. We had a meeting regarding funding and things like that. I think it was about 2 weeks ago now, and pretty much all of us were there, and it was a good conversation, and continue to keep that open dialogue with all the unions.
Well, I think ultimately it's important, obviously. So and kind of on that, one of the other unions that's affected by these layoffs and the service cuts is the Movement of United Professionals, Move Up for, and we had Christy on the last podcast. And so they've actually got a campaign, which is Fund Transit Now, which you can get through their website, which is moveuptogether.ca. I think that's a good place, because I know folks that listen to this podcast, we're usually the type of people, there's not very many wallflowers, I say that, that listen to this podcast. It's usually people that want to take some sort of action. And so I think that's one place that definitely people can go. People can also go to your website to find out more information about your union. But I think for immediate action on what's happening right now around TransLink, would you agree that's probably a good place to go, is the Move Up website?
For sure, the Move Up website where the Fund Transit Now petition's on. There's also SaveTransit.ca is another one. We're trying to get a bunch of these web links so that we can upload them and get them to all our members as well over the coming days. So, we need to put more pressure on the federal government. I think the provincial government knows the pressure, and now we need to send Mr. Trudeau a message and let him know that him and his staff over there need to look out this way and deal with transit and really help us out, because if it does get worse, I don't know how bad it'll get.
Well, I think that this pandemic has opened up a lot of eyes to a lot of the different ways that we spend federal dollars, provincial dollars, private dollars, public dollars, and where we're spending it, how we're spending it, why we're spending it. If you look at, obviously, manufacturing in this country and in the US is being seen as it's an issue that everything is made overseas, obviously. Maybe that will open some eyes. I think long-term care centers, I think that is something that people are going to look at now and kind of think like, holy smokes, like the model that we have as no bueno. And I think, you know, funding models for transit systems, like I can see all the reasons why it should be a public funding model. And perhaps it's, you know, supplemented by rider fares. But I mean, obviously, the way it's going on right now, there isn't enough funding. Even though we're saying it's important, we're saying it's essential, we don't have a model right now that actually respects it as being essential.
And I agree with you. They, you know, they've made us an essential service due to COVID-19, and I tend not to use the word essential. I like to use the word more critical.
Yeah.
I think ultimately we are a critical service. We're a critical service when this pandemic's over.
Yeah.
Right. We're just a critical service, and we need to continue to stay running. And the federal government needs to help us out right now. Like I said earlier today, it's put your money where your mouth is, right? You've made us an essential service, so buck up.
Yeah.
And it ultimately needs to go there.
I could not agree more. Look, you're obviously a busy person. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We will have you. I want to have you back on the podcast so we can actually just talk about being two Portuguese people in the labor movement, bringing good food and good dancing to the labor movement. Because
there you go.
That's what Portuguese people do, and good port, of course. But look, brother, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I will make sure that Labornauts listeners are activated and that we're paying attention to what's going on around these layoffs. But let's have you back on, hopefully for good news next time.
Sounds good. And thanks for having me, Carlos.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for listening in the podcast. Please go to CUPE 7000, CUPE7000.ca, I believe is the website. Tony, that's right. You find out stuff about them there. If you're not yet, I don't know why you wouldn't be, but please follow the Labornauts at Labornauts on all things social media. If you want to hear more from me, go to @SayHiToCarlos on all things social media. And that's it, brother. Thank you very much.
Thank you.